Hello everyone, this is Defense Politics Asia, and this is the summary or the situation report, the SITREP for the day of 1259 to 1262 for the 5th to the 8th of August. Today is the 9th of August, not 9th of August, and it's the Singapore's National Day. So I want to wish all the Singaporeans in the DPA Army a happy National Day. Majulah Singapura. And we're going to jump straight into the SITREP. We haven't done a SITREP for a few days, so let's get to it. As usual, we try to go from Sumy region, and then we'll go clockwise direction, and with Kherson or Kherson front. There is a number of geolocations in the past 4 days. I believe that's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. No, 4 days. There is Garan drone strike. This is a Iskander missile strike. This is UAV strike. So the Russians are still actively hunting possible targets in the non-battle zones. There is no active fighting along here except for Serednia. Never mind. Later I will zoom in and see how to pronounce the word. Yeah. So except this is something new. There's the Russians consistently looking for targets. And I believe that Russian drones continue to operate in the Ukrainian territory unimpeded. And there's an interesting report coming from the Ukrainian side. Seredina Buda, this borders town is under attack by the Russian forces. According to the Ukrainian side, they have report for the past 2 days, 7th and the 8th, that the Russians attack over at this sector here. And this persistent attack is very unusual because if it's just one-off, I can understand, because that does happen, skirmishes. But this is a sustained attack, so this is something to look out for. But it doesn't look like a major offensive, because a major offensive would not be just one location. The Russians will have to attack multiple locations to because it's an entire front line, right? If you send in a brigade or a battalion or a division, they have a much larger front line. So yeah, that's not what it is, but we shall see how this goes. This one not very normal. Over in the Sumy front, although that place is also part of Sumy, but this is just out of the Sumy front coverage that we have. Over in the Tekhino sector, we have Russian forces continue to harass the Ukrainian forces in this sector. Fighting is reported at Rizivka, Iskryskina, Palivka, and Yastrubine. None of this give me the sense that it's a sustained thing. This is on the 6th, this is on the 7th, this is on the 7th, and then Rizivka is on the 6th. It's just like one-off kind of thing. So the Russians continue to put pressure to draw the Ukrainians away from the other side, so that they cannot just focus all their attention over where the main fighting is. And then we go to where the main fighting is. It's basically north of Sumy. So Sumy is over here. Over this sector here, shelling is reported at Bischany. The Russian forces continue their operation at Andriivka, Oleksievka, Vereshkine, Yablunivka, Yunakivka, and attacking towards Kiprashkina, Novosich, and Kochakivka. Fighting is also mentioned over at Mauritsia, which is only a one-off on the 5th, but mainly that's about it. It's largely the same strategic situation as previously. Nothing strange, I would say, coming out from this sector. This is still pretty much the same strategic situation happening in the Sumy front. We move on to the next front line, the Kharkiv front. This is Kharkiv, and this is the Kharkiv front. The fighting mainly this time round is only concentrated over in the Vovchansk sector. So this is Vovchansk, and the fighting is being reported over at Hatishev towards Sinelnikove, which is a bit unusual. Maybe the Russians have penetrated through the forest and resulted in fighting over at Sinelnikove. Fighting is also mentioned at Vovchansk as well as Taike. So so this is the main gist of the situation in the sector. Doesn't look like a big offensive per se. Like the Sinelnikove was also only mentioned on the 5th of August. Even Hatishev was mentioned twice on the 5th and the 6th, but no, it is not mentioned since. So tentatively, I think this is still a pretty sleepy front line. It's not something to worry about, or no, it's not really where the Russians are doing their main operations are at. Over at the Vorsza front, Vorsza is here. In the north of Vorsza, we have the fighting continue over in the Milove sector. Fighting is now mentioned at Chuhunivka, Katne, Ambarny, as well as at Milove itself. The situation here remains the same. The Russians basically is holding this buffer zone. Then either the Russians cannot push out or the Ukrainians are getting sucked in, and it's just more or less the same skirmish. Same situation in the Vovchansk sector of the Kharkiv front. We move on into the Vorsza region. In the north of Vorsza, Russian forces are fighting at Novovassilivka as well as Fiholivka. So that's the main two areas that the fighting is reported. Nothing particularly peculiar about this. So we move on. So these are all one-off reports. We move into the Kupyansk front. Over the northern flank of the Kupyansk, so we have fighting reported over at Tishchinkivka, Kindrashivka, Radkivka, as well as Kulubivka. There is some frontline changes noted that sees the Russians conquering all the remaining outskirts of northern Kupyansk, with the Russians looking to attack into Kupyansk itself. Geolocation of Russian forces just south of Radkivka was noted. This is a Russian assault force. So clearly the front line is more or less in this sector here. There is still no evidence of the Russians' capture of Moskovka. I know there are other pro-Russian mapping that claims that Moskovka is taken. I know some people write in the comment. No, he say Moskovka is Moskovka. Yeah, Miskivka. It's Miskivka. It's Ukraine. No, it's Ukraine. No, it's Miskivka. And the Ukrainians can't even write their own Ukrainian properly. So it's Moskovka now. So anyway, there's no evidence of the capture. So it is what it is. So the Ukrainians are seemingly still holding the Russians on this line. However, the line, it has a lot of gaps, and the Russians able to sneak through, and as they sneak through, what happens is that they appear over in Sobolevka on the west of Kupyansk. Geolocation of Russian soldier is a singular, one soldier. He basically show his presence to the Russian drone, and then basically show that he is in Sobolevka. Clearly, there is no Ukrainian soldiers around, and there's no reasons for Ukrainian soldiers to be around here. The main reason is because this is not even near the front line at all. The front line is here, where the Ukrainians probably have their troops gathered in this sector here, and not like 3 kilometers away from the front line. So this is a very concerning situation for the Ukrainians, because where is the gap? If you are the commander on the ground, where's the gap? How did the Russian soldier got through? And if one soldier can get through, then a whole squad of them can get through, or perhaps a whole platoon, a company, or perhaps a whole battalion can get through. So where are they? How did they get through? This is a problem that Ukrainians have to solve. I'm quite sure since the geolocation, this happened on the 6th of August, Ukrainian forces must have sent hunter squads, those better trained soldiers, to try to hunt for these guys. And it must be a very painstaking process, because as you go into the Sobolivka region, this soldier or the squad that has infiltrated into Sobolivka may have planted mines or booby traps, or they may be laying an ambush anywhere within Sobolivka. And any Ukrainian soldiers that's going to hunt for these few guys is going to be under severe stress, because you do not know which corner you may actually get shot at. So this kind of situation is horrible, which is also why airborne troops are are highly priced, and they are considered elites, because when you drop them behind enemy lines, it would absolutely disrupt operations of your enemy. So, but we haven't seen airborne troops being used in the airborne way. They are all groundborne troops around, right now. So the only time the airborne troops was really airborne was actually all the way at the beginning of the war. So there's a situation here in Kupyansk. In the south, there is shelling reported at this place called Tamarhanivka. So this is the first time we have seen this place mentioned, and fighting is reported at Stepova Novoselivka, Korolevka, and Khrushchevka. Yeah, so these other ones are a bit more routine, nothing particularly to think about. Ukrainian forces geolocated off Petropavlivka didn't exactly change the front line, so that's the main gist of the situation here in the Kupyansk front. And we move on to the next front line, the Borova front. I really want to say the places in the correct accent, the correct pronunciation, but I need to warm up my Russian accent before I can speak the Russian. Ura! Zarizove! Or can ready, my Russian accent is ready. Apparently the Ura helps. No, Ura. The Russian forces attacked Zarizove, Novokrylakivka, Novoplatonivka, Chernashkina, Vishev Kolone. So there's the places, horrible accent, but I know horrible accent. It's okay. Most of us are not Russian speakers, so it's okay. Just pretend that's Russian accent. So anyway, so that's the main gist of the situation. The fighting is mainly still in the north. Cherniskina continues to be one of these main targeted plays, but yeah, nothing. But none of these are actually the main push. So it's largely more skirmish based. Further south into the Oskil and the northern flank of the Lyman front. So just now Cherniskina is here. Should I zoom in? Maybe it's a bad idea. Yeah, it's a bad idea. So shelling is reported at Vishev Kolone, as mentioned. Fighting is reported at Kharkivka, Zryzhelyubivka, Ohievka, Novomaya, Khrushchenkove, Rikuruk-Karpivka, Serene, Shandrikholove, Zelena Dolena, Kolozyazi, and shelling is reported at Krimki. Not Krimki, Krimki. This is another place. So that's the main gist. It looks like a lot of arrows, but it's mainly just the Russians doing the Russian things here. There is not much frontline changes over this sector here. There is one tiny one based on the geolocation. That is a O1, and then there's another one with at Serene. This Serene one actually corroborated part of the Russian claims of the push in the direction of Serene. But since then, there is no more updates regarding this sector here. So I think the operational secrecy here is pretty strong. We do not know what the hell is happening. So we just have to wait. Over the Lyman front itself, so fighting is reported at Shandrikholove, as mentioned just now, Serene. Yarova is shelled. And then Kolozyazi, Nemerne, Yampolivka, Stavki, Zarishne, Toske, Yampil, Borova, and Serbiansky forestry in the direction of Krychorevka. So there is also a lot of targeted attacks on Ukrainian positions and antennas inside of Lyman. So a lot of shelling over here and airstrikes. Looks like the Russians are preparing the a potential assault. They are softening the Ukrainian position inside Lyman. As the Russians are moving into Zarishne, the next stop will be to Lyman. Shelling is also reported at Stary Karavan, but it's very far away, so not particularly important. So the most significant advance in the Lyman front mainly is over in the Toretsk Zarishne region. So after the alleged capture of Toretsk, because of all these big captured grounds, encirclement, no idea what the hell is happening, there is a geolocation of Russian forces on the 8th of August entering into Zarishne. So this geolocation shows the Russian forces have started to push into Zarishne, and we do not know how manned the defenses are in Zaporizhzhia right now, because there is a lot of manpower issue that is showing up in a lot of the front line. And how we know? Because of the frontline changes. The frontline changes just literally just show us where the front lines are extremely weak. And when the front line is extremely weak, it's usually because of manpower issue. Because the Ukrainians up to this point is not known to do mobile warfare in the defensive way. So you can do mobile warfare defensively, like you retreat, draw the enemies into a kill box, shoot them, you go back to the position. Actually, that's what the Russians do. The Ukrainians instead they don't do this, despite they keep boasting about fighting in the NATO style of warfare, although no NATO countries fight like them. So that's the main thing here. So we shall continue to monitor this, but I think the main thing is that the Russians have entered Zaporizhzhia, and I think they're starting to shell and attack Ukrainian positions within Lyman, so that after the conquest of Zaporizhzhia, they can then start to push towards Lyman, and I think they're preparing the ground for it. So mainly that's the gist of the situation. The fighting here is a lot fiercer than over in the further up in the north, and over in the Krychorivka, near the Krychorivka region in the Serebrensk forestry, Russian forces made a lot of advance along the river, the Siversk Donetsk river. This one is based on Ukrainian mapping. They start to close down all these impossible salient along the river, because the Ukrainian soldiers unlikely will be able to stay in this kind of position. I think the front line is probably closer to where Serebrenka is. So we will still continue to likely to see Russians continue to capture all these grounds along the way. The fighting is mainly reported within the Serebrensk forestry in the direction of Krychorivka or Serebrenka. So basically is in the direction of Serebrenka or Krychorivka. So they are claiming that the Russians are pushing in these kind of directions. So we shall see how these continue to develop. The Ukrainians are losing ground, and then we have the Ukrainian Defense Ministry mentioning Yampil, which means fighting is now moving closer to Yampil, and I believe this is coming from Toretsk. So Ukrainian reports is more closer to where it's about where the fighting is. The Russians mix in where they shell the Ukrainian forces. So when the Ukrainians mention fighting is at Yampil, or near to Yampil or towards Yampil, then the fighting is actually definitely moving towards Yampil or near Yampil. So that is some kind of a sign that things is really not well for the Ukrainians right now. So that's the gist of the situation in the Lyman front. Moving into the Siversk front, okay, oh my god, I already spoken for 80 minutes. I'm so sorry. People who wanted short videos, that's not what SITREPs are, unfortunately. And over in the Siversk front, I think I should zoom out a bit. Maybe zoom in this like this. So Russian forces fighting at Bilohorivka. They straightened the front line in the north of Vovchansk. Fighting is reported at Siversk, Vovchansk, Vimka, Zvanivka, Perezhne, and Fedorivka. So that is the main gist at the Siversk front. The fighting here is it looks less intense than it was previously. So there is no evidence of Russians entering into Siversk yet. This has not happened. The Russians seems to be focusing on strengthening the front line along this sector here, which they doesn't seem to have successfully done it yet. Like for example, in the south, you have geolocation of Ukrainian forces just off Vimka. So this is a drone attacking a IFV, infantry fighting vehicle, showing that Ukrainians are still in this region. So the Russians still have some grounds to go. They are still stuck at Vimka. And even the mention of Zvanivka, we do not know where it comes from. Maybe it's in this direction. We don't know. This geolocation is a hit of a Ukrainian position. So Russian forces are putting pressure on Perezhne and Fedorivka. This other geolocation here is a helicopter guided missile strike. So the Ukrainians definitely is still in the sector here, and the Russians are still have not really conquered the place. Siversk front continue to be quite formidable. The Russians is still going to put in a lot of work before they can conquer the place. But that's the main gist over the past 4 days. So not much change except that, you know, this area here, this is pretty new. This is today's frontline changes report by Deep State UA, where they have straightened the front line in this salient here. Otherwise, yeah, that's mainly it for the Siversk front. We go on to the Bakhmut front. So this Bakhmut, at the Bakhmut front, strategically, we have fighting reported at Vasilkivka, Minkivka, Orkovo-Vasilivka, Novomakove, Ryhorivka, Mainske, Chasivya, Mykolaievka, Stupovsky. Shelling is reported at Konstantinivka, and further away another place. I cannot see the place. What is the place called? Ilinivka. So that one is not really part of the front line here. Geolocation of Ukrainians getting hit over at Minkivka was noted. So generally it's very skirmishy as well. Very similar to the Oskiu Lyman front region. There is the major frontline change over here in Ryhorivka with the Ukrainian mapping updated the maps. Their maps in the southwest of Ryhorivka showing the Russian forces, you know, securing the canal region as well as the rough hilly region here in the north of Chasivya, as this push is moving in the direction of Mainske. So Russian forces largely straighten the front line in this sector. So then that's the main change in the sector here. There is no more news regarding Chasivya after the Russian claim of capture. The main fighting is mentioned by the Russians to be at Mykolaievka. The Ukrainians are the one that is still talking about Chasivya. So, you know, there's this divide in opinions. You know, the Ukrainians think that the fighting is still at Chasivya. The Russians think that they have conquered Chasivya. So, which is why we have this differing report from the two sides. So we move on to the Toretsk front. So this is Toretsk, and can I zoom in, zoom out? Okay, so this is Toretsk city. So this is the whole of the Toretsk front. So strategically, the Russians are attacking across the entire front line. Actually, fighting is reported at Bilohorivka, Oleksandro-Shutiny, Dilievka, Nelipivka, Ivanopilia, Plishievka, Katerinivka, Toretsk, Shebenivka, Novospassky, and Romanivka, Oleksandro-Kalinove, Yablunivka, and towards Stepanivka. So quite a number of things actually happen in this sector here. This is one of the main offensive region. The Russian forces have been confirmed. So I think to zoom in. Over in the Oleksandro-Shutiny region, Russian forces with geolocation confirmed the Russian claim is accurate, that they have indeed captured of this sector here in the south of Oleksandro-Shutiny. Geolocation of Dilievka confirmed the Russians have pushed up north. There's some terrible arrows, I think. Yeah. So push up north in the western flank of Ivanopilia. The fighting is moving in these three towns. So that is happening. There is geolocation of Ukrainians over in Kherson, but then the main big one is this one. So there is this long neck dinosaurs popping its head into Katerinivka, capturing the center part of Katerinivka, which means the whole of Katerinivka is probably under Russian control right now. Ukrainians may be holding Kherson and the forest in the north, and this is forcing this gap where the Ukrainians can move through smaller and smaller is now only 1.2 or 1.3 kilometers, and this proves the Russians are making a lot of push. There is gap in the defenses in this sector here, allowing the Russians to make this breakthrough. So Ukrainians are struggling. I think the front line in the Toretsk front is really long due to this very awkward shape, which means that a front line that could be very simple has now tripled in length, and this means you need triple the manpower, and it's just untenable. So all this situation is showing that the the salient is now untenable, and the front line is starting to collapse. So, like for example, in the northeast of Shebenivka, the Ukrainian mapping have starting to write off all these grounds in the west of Toretsk, showing the Russians indeed have full control over Toretsk actually. And this is just one spot, and Shebenivka itself is already a salient. Maybe they have this place, but this open ground, it doesn't really matter that much. But this is already a very difficult salient to hold. And then between Novospassky and Romanivka, this entire sector here, this is one of the latest mapping, has been lost to the Russians as well. And when you see something like this, the furthest point of the salient collapsing, that might be a sign that the Ukrainian forces are withdrawing or retreating from the salient. So they might be giving up the salient as we see this collapse. This collapse is pretty far. We're talking about a distance of 2.6 kilometers. So this is a very big collapse of the front line, and the front line is moving up north. These are all for farming tree lines. And then you have here, you have this is the current situation. This looks really bad. This looks really bad. So you can see this is already very difficult. Like how are you going to go out? This is like, if your stomach look like this, please go to see a doctor. So this looks really bad. So I think as a result, I think we are seeing that the Russian this salient here in Toretsk is actually collapsing. Like I mentioned quite a number of times, I think it's important to mention again, Ukrainians cannot retreat. They cannot resupply or rotate their troops or retreat from this direction, because the Russians have already captured Alexandro Kalinove, and they have full control over this side and the highway. So this highway is already cut off. It cannot be used. And the Russians have, with their presence at Katerinivka and nearby, just south of Nelipivka, shows that the Ukrainian, this throat here is very small. They have a tiny throat and a terrible stomach in the south. So this is the situation here in Toretsk. I expecting more frontline changes coming from Toretsk. As I mentioned, I don't expect this Toretsk front to survive maybe a month. I think within 2 weeks, this whole place will collapse. This is kind of my guess, because it's just impossible to hold. So that's the main thing here. And on top of this, in today's Russian Defense Ministry's report, they have announced the capture of Yablunivka. So they have announced the capture of the whole place of Yablunivka. So this is an announcement. We cannot corroborate this yet. And we move on to the next front line, the Pokrovsk front. Pokrovsk is over here. So this is Pokrovsk. And we go to the northern flank of the Pokrovsk front, which is here. So this is the northern flank. Russian forces captured quite a bit of grounds over in Rusinya. They basically have entered into Rusinya itself. They have also taken the entire western bank of Poltavka. Ukrainian forces are geolocated far away. I think this is a armored vehicle. So Ukrainians are standing off, at least the armored vehicle is standing off in the distance, with the Russian forces penetrating into Rusinya. Fighting is reported at Volodymyrivka. Novotoretsk is secured by the Russian forces. I believe I have mentioned in the previous SITREP, maybe. And then in the latest report, I will zoom in this one. This is one of the latest mapping. Ukrainian mapping have mapped that the Russian forces have actually flanked on the eastern flank of Nikhanorivka. So they have do this flanking operation in between Mayak and Nikhanorivka. So this is actually pretty shocking. Fighting is reported at Nikhanorivka, Dorozhny, Fedorivka, Zatishok, and then Russian forces entering into Suketsky and having a strong position in the west of Razine. This one I believe I mentioned in the previous rep as well. Fighting is consistently being mentioned at Rodinsky and Shevoni Lyman. There's also mention of Novoekonomichny as well. So this is also the other major front line that the Russians are making a major push. I think one of the three. Toretsk is already one of them. So this is another big one. And the biggest one, as mentioned, I think these are already mentioned in the previous SITREP. So because these are 4th of August report, because it's still red because of the frontline changes report. And the main big one is this one. So this is the latest mapping. This is a very, very awkward one. You can see this is a bit weird. So the Russian forces basically have captured these grounds according to Ukrainian mapping. So one horn just flew up. But if you look at Ukrainian mapping, the gray zone is actually pretty enormous. I want to see whether I can show you. So based on Ukrainian mapping, the gray zone actually encompasses the entire of Nikhanorivka, and they are getting very close to the other town called, what is it called? Dorizhny, which is why Dorizhny, there is fighting being reported here by the Ukrainian Defense Ministry, because Russian forces potentially have already reached that place, and they have probably already pushed up north further based on the gray zone. So despite our mappings like this, wherever I map in pink is Russian capture, and the capture is firm capture. So the Russians could potentially be attacking out of this position already, and they have already probably reached Dorozhny. They are attacking up north, trying to flank Shakove over here. So this situation here is looking worse by the minute. It's looking really bad right now. So these are major developments with the Russian forces entering into the eastern part of this town called Nikhanorivka. So these are already mentioned. The Russians didn't go and cut the road yet. Maybe the Ukrainians are putting up a very, very strong defense here, so the Russians cannot penetrate through. Further south into the Minohrad sector. So this is the Minohrad sector, and this Pokrovsk. This is where the static line are. So the Russian forces are fighting Novoekonomichny, as mentioned earlier, Mykolaiivka, Maryolubivka, Minohrad, Kozatsky, Promin, Lysivka, Novoukrenka, Chunishine, Novopalivka, Zirove, Kotliny, Udashne, geolocation of Russian forces inside of Pokrovsk and fighting at Pokrovsk itself. So the main gist, the main important ones, like there's a geolocation here, the Russian airstrike with a FAB 3000. So that is not so important. We know, but the thing here is that this is still pretty much a static line now. The Russians didn't seem to want to do this, close down. All the Ukrainians are resisting very fiercely. Similarly, the situation here also seems to be pretty static. The Russians, however, seems to be upgrading the front line, moving up the front line further up north over this sector, particularly over at Novoukrenka. Geolocation of Russian forces in a new position, confirming the Russians have basically entered into Chunishine from Novoukrenka area. So there's this push up north. I think the Russians are trying to straighten the front line south of Novopavlivka. I think that's the main aim right now. And inside of Pokrovsk, there is a geolocation, yet another geolocation of Russian getting striked. So we have now expanded zone of possible Russian presence inside of Pokrovsk. However, there is still no idea, no link to where it links back to the actual front line. And in fact, if you look at the reporting, fighting is all mentioned at Zvivrove, according to the Ukrainian Defense Ministry. They did not mention fighting over at Lyotovishki, which means that the Ukrainians are still probably defending in this sector here, but then the gap is so big that the Russians just walked through into this area here, causing the geolocation which caused our frontline change to look like this. However, the Ukrainians may actually still be operating in the Lyotovishki region, trying to defend Vivrove, and that could be a possibility. So I just want to let you know this might be the case. It's not necessarily mean that the Russians have a firm capture of all these places. I think the Ukrainians have such a severe manpower issue that even when they go to defend the place, the gap of the front line is so bad. The Russian soldiers are just like waltzing and walking all over the place in Pokrovsk. I have did a report on Pokrovsk itself, And I've mentioned in the report as well, I said that this kind of situation is not good because the Ukrainian soldiers will have extreme stress when they operate in the within the AO, which is the area of operation, and they might just give up, when they get contacted and then just think that, oh, Pokrovsk is lost, and they basically lost the whole city to phantom soldiers, because they just assume there are more Russian soldiers in the city than it is, and this kind of a security problem have to be resolved. But I'm not sure if the Ukrainians have the manpower to actually resolve it. Pokrovsk is not a small city. So, and you can see how weird this situation is. Russian forces are getting shelled here, but the Ukrainian forces is getting airstrike here by the Fab 3000. So Russian presence is here, Ukrainian presence is here. How does this work? No idea. So I mentioned the situation here is in Pokrovsk is very confusing. So like I said, any mapping that draws very firmly like this, that is just a lizard, there's just a lizard, like the tongue come out and just something like this. So not real, no lizard screams. There's the lizards do not have a voice box, they cannot talk, so they can only hiss. So anyway, that's it from the Pokrovsk Minohrad sector. Over in this the rest of this in the western flank of the Pokrovsk front, we have fighting reported at just now as mentioned Kotline, Udashne. Around Udashne region, the Russian forces have straightened the front line, simplified the front line around Udashne, attacking in the direction of Molodetsky. Novomykolaiivka is mentioned, Borovka is mentioned, Novopalivka is mentioned. However, these front lines are largely static. So I don't expect too much from this western flank of the Pokrovsk. This is not where the Russians are focusing on. The main focus right now in the Pokrovsk front, is over here. This is the main actions. And then of course in the Toretsk front. So these are the main offensive sectors here. These two. So the rest of the front line here, these are all straightened. These are all static lines, largely. So maybe some bit here. So these are more largely static lines. And then the other major push is over in the Pokrovsk front, where the Russians are making the main push. So the Koma front. So this is the Koma region. So this 1, 2, and the third place is here. And then of course we have the Lyman front region. So it's 4 places actually. So over in the Oleksievka sector, and also the southern flank of the Pokrovsk front. So in this Oleksievka sector, we have this push as mentioned just now towards Novopalivka. Fighting is reported at Orikove. Oleksievka is somehow being mentioned, Zelenikud as well. And then there is some frontline changes over in Dashne region, not particularly important. These are all very arbitrary ones, where it's all sensible, logical ones, nothing special about that. However, west towards the north of Koma, we have a bit more things. So let me move this whole thing here so that I can cover all of them. So the Russian forces in the north of Koma have attacked Yalta, and then they have captured grounds in the north of Khrushchevsky as well as Novokhatsk. So all these areas here is getting captured by the Russian forces. The Russians also straightened over at Tolstoy. Fighting is reported at Zeleny High, probably moving into Ivanivka and over in Iskra at Andrievka Kletsove. So, and the fighting is reported at Rikuruk. So that's the main situation here. And interestingly, within the impossible salient or weird salient here, there is a geolocation of shelling on Ukrainian armored vehicle. So Ukrainian armor is moving in to try to maintain this gray zone, where probably not very successful. The Russians are also pushing towards Filia. Over here, they're pushing towards Filia. So the front line here, it's not aesthetic. Not aesthetic sounds like he's not happy. So the Orikove, this area here should be pretty static. This sector here, the Russians are trying to close up the front line, maybe straighten the front line like this. They probably will do this, and straighten the front line here. probably as well. And then probably moving the fighting into Ivanivka, probably flanking Filia, and then try to straighten the front line in the west of Tolstoy. So this is the main situation that the Russians are pushing in. So all these frontline changes, I think I don't have to go through into details, right? It's pretty self-evident of what's happening. And so over in the central part of the Koma front, so this is a very big front line. We have to cover quite a number of times, break it up in quite a number of ways. So Koma is over here. This is Koma. So Russian forces fight at Vovchansk. The impossible salient is still here. There's no change to the impossible salient. Fighting is reported at Oleksandrograd, Shifnevi, Malievka, Shevchenko, Venipole, Komishuvakha, Novohyokhievka, Novoselivka, and shelling is reported at Sosnivka, as well as Veliko Nikolaevka. So this is the main thing here. The lines here, actually, it looks very, the arrows of the reporting all looks very dynamic. But the lack of frontline changes, the lack of reporting does make it look really static. I'm not sure if it's actually that static, because this area here looks pretty logical for the Russians to actually make some major push. So I think we are just lacking reporting in this sector here, so we just have to wait. North of Alexandrograd, this is a T-72, Ukrainian T-72 getting destroyed or hit. So the Ukrainians are very serious about trying to defend this area here. Let's see. Let's see what happens. Further south in the southern flank of the Koma front, so we have fighting reported at Komishuvakha, as mentioned just now, Venipole, Zelenipole, strengthening of the front line at the west of Novosilka is noted. Fighting is reported Novohyokhievka, Temerivka, Novomykolaivka, Novoivanivka. Fighting is reported Novopil, Novodarivka, and the Russians make some frontline changes west of Novodarivka as they push it towards the south of Novoivanivka. Shelling is reported at Uspenivka as well. That's pretty much over into the Zaporizhzhia front already. So this is the main gist of the situation. I think the main idea the Russians are still doing is to straighten the front line and simplify the front line. I think that's the main aim for now. And then press to capture the rest of the Donetsk Oblast and push into the defense line in the Dnipro region. So that's the main area here. So that's all from the Koma front. Very, very complicated front line to report because there is quite a number of sectors. Like just now we covered like this. So, we covered into 3 different sectors here. So the very, very big front line. And we move on to the Zaporizhzhia front at the Huyaipole sector. So you can see this is also a very big place. So this is Huyaipole. And then the Russians are attacking over in Ohivsky, Potovka, and Melanivka. So this is Huyaipole. So there's some push around here, and the reports here is rather consistent, 6 to 8. Yeah, so around there's some push. Not yet major offensive yet, but it seems to be ramping up. And I think they want to test the Ukrainian defense around here. So that's all from the Huyaipole sector. Over in the Kharkiv sector of the Zaporizhzhia front, the fighting is reported at Novoandrievka, Novodanilivka, as well as Bilokiya. So nothing special about the reporting here. Nothing really stands out except that the Novodanilivka and Novoandrievka is mentioned quite often. So we shall see whether this becomes a new offensive, but unlikely. And then in the Kherson sector, we have fighting reported over at Stepove, Kanyamsky. Russian forces actually geolocated in a new position. Basically, the Russians entering into the south of Stepnohursk, with fighting reported at Stepnohursk and Plavny. The Ukrainian counteroffensive in the west of Kanyamsky has went silent. We do not know what the hell is happening over there. So, and then geolocation of Ukrainian position was hit in the north of Plavny. So that is the main situation in Kupyansk sector. This area here, the Russians indeed is pushing, but very minimal news. We do not know much about what's actually happening. So that's it. I'm not going to talk about the strategy here for the Russians. I already mentioned quite a number of times. Basically this. So and we move on to the last front line. And before I go there, again, happy National Day to the Singaporeans, and happy birthday to you if your birthday today, and happy birthday to you, Singapore, because it's Singapore's birthday. And then yeah, press the like button, subscribe. We are very close to 100,000 subs. Let me see. My latest number is 99372. So another 600 to go. You know, so if you are not subscribed and you subscribe, you might actually be the one that push the channel to 100,000, because it is possible, because a lot of you guys, easily 50% of you guys do not press the subscribe button. So if you all press all at the same time, we will go past 100,000 immediately. So now we go on to the last front line, the Kherson front, or the Kherson front. So the mapping is loading super slowly. So let me refresh, give me a second. So now last front line, the Kherson front. So there is mention of fighting in the Dnipro or direction, or the pre-Dniprovsky direction. There is no clear mentioning of where exactly. So so as usual, I always just put it at Dniprovsky. But otherwise, there's quite a number of shelling report by the Russian Defense Ministry at Ohievka, Lvove, Darivka, Mikhailske, Sadove, Antonivka, and Kherson. But that's it. Otherwise, there is a geolocation of an airstrike on Ukrainian position at Darivka. But there's nothing new to report. The Russian amphibious or multi-pronged attack across the river system has been abandoned. So tentatively, maybe the Russians give it a try and test the waters, and they realize the water is still pretty thick. So yeah, so they're going to wait further for the Ukrainian combat capacity to fall further. I mentioned it's too early. When I first reported, remember when I mentioned about the Russians trying to attack multiple locations in along the Kherson region, I say that it does feels a bit too early to do it, and I think I'm right again. That it's still a bit too early for the Russians to try to do an amphibious assault into the northern half of Kherson. So until we see crazy collapses in the other front line, like currently there's big collapses, but it's not crazy yet. You have to be like a 50 square kilometers, 100 square kilometers change per day in the other major front line first. Then an amphibious assault would work. Otherwise, it would just be a very expensive operation. The Russians are still going to succeed if they do it, but the thing is, a lot of people is going to die unnecessarily. So I don't think that this is a time for the Russians to do it yet, and I think the Ukrainians are running out of options, because Trump is forcing a peace deal, but the Russians will never agree to anything that involve giving Ukrainians more ground. So any ground that the Russians captured unlikely will be given up unless there's a land swap of thing, which I think was the proposal. So there is this meeting arranged at Alaska, of all places. They've decided to meet in Alaska between Trump and Putin. So Zelensky wouldn't be there, and before the meeting, the Europeans will be meeting in UK with the Americans and Ukraine for this emergency meeting before this, because they want to have a say in it. But let's see how this goes. So anyway, that's it. So this is the summary for the day of 1259 to 1262 for the 5th to the 8th of August. So thank you for watching. It's a long report. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next update.